the first month was like just like sit on the bed and like cry. I'm going in my Ph.D. and I brought up so many insecurities out of my life. Spoiler alert, all of us are the bodhisattvas of the earth. That's like our belief, right? It's just we aren't like awakened to that. We haven't kind of like remembered that.
From SGI USA, I'm Cassidy Bradford, and this is Buddhability, the weekly series where I talk with Buddhists from all walks of life about the power we each have to change our lives and the world around us. All right, Alex, thank you so much for joining the Buddhability podcast. I'm excited to have you here. I always start things out with the guests just introducing themselves, so you can share your name, where you're from, how old you are, and just like what you do for work or school.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I'm Alex Scheffelin. I'm originally like grew up near Seattle in a suburb close to Seattle, but I moved to New York in like the summer of 22 to start a Ph.D. in math at Columbia. So that's what I do for work and also what I study. So
yeah, we were talking a little bit earlier about math because I know pretty much nothing. And it seems like a very interesting kind of work and kind of like fun to be able to just like spend all of your time. Well, maybe it's not all of your time, but like spend your time like really focusing in on like puzzles and answering questions and doing research. But of course, we're going to talk about Buddhism as well today. So maybe you could just tell me a little bit about like your life growing up and how you started practicing Buddhism.
Great. Yeah. So I'm half Japanese, right? My mom is Japanese.
Okay, that's why you were speaking Japanese earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up speaking Japanese, so that's why I speak it. But my mom's Japanese, and then my dad's like just like American white, But my mom started practicing Buddhism when she was like in high school over in Japan. So when I was born, I was already kind of in the house, and so growing up, like I would go to various, gatherings, meetings. I knew about Buddhism, I guess, if you asked me as a kid what my religion was, I would have said I'm Buddhist, So that was kind of how I got like introduced to it. So I was always around it, but it wasn't really necessarily until I got like older, kind of like I was entering like teenage years and stuff that I really started feeling like I associated kind of with it. Like I started hitting a time where like I started forming my own opinions about things, and it wasn't just like your parents tell you this and that forms like your entire worldview. Because I was already in a habit of like going to all these like gatherings and hearing people sharing their experiences, kind of hearing like little study presentations, learning about the philosophy and stuff. I really felt like it spoke to me, and like I was like, wow, this really like makes sense and it's really positive, and I felt like main thing was I guess I felt like encouraged from it. So, having it in my life felt like it was like beneficial. So from there, I kind of started taking it more seriously, so I think that was kind of my journey, with it. Like when I was young and, things led to another, and, now I'm here. So.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a household that practiced Buddhism too, and there were like, for me, just like a couple of moments where like, I really wanted this one thing, so I would chant about it, or that was usually it until I had kind of like a big moment before college where I realized like, I need to take a little bit more like responsibility for my happiness and for my life. And I think feeling like a sense of like my own identity too. Was there any like particular moment for you or something that you like really challenged when you were in middle or high school, or was it something that just kind of naturally like was a part of your daily life?
Yeah, so, growing up, I didn't really have, like, a habit of chanting, to be honest. Like, it took, like, way, way longer than I'm proud to admit to, like, really, hone in on that one. I think that's one part that I took for granted, was, like, chanting, which is, like, funny because it's, like, the basis, really of everything. But I think for me, like, in high school, like, when I was going to all these meetings and things, I would hear a lot of experiences by people which, like, was like always very powerful and impactful, but like usually it was coming from people that were like either a good bit or maybe a lot bit, older than me, so I was hearing stuff about people like, dealing with visa issues, people that were dealing with illness, maybe some relatives had passed away, things with jobs, apartments, stuff like that. And I was like, that's cool and all, but like, I'm 13,
yeah.
like, like, I don't know, like, I don't pay rent, like, so I really didn't like, it felt like this is a good thing, but like, I really didn't draw the connection towards like, this is a thing that like I could or should do.
Yeah.
But as I started kind of hitting like maybe around like 16, maybe like sophomore, junior year of high school, like I had more and more opportunities to kind of like really interact and meet like other people that were practicing Buddhism in my age. And, a lot of them were maybe in a similar spot as me, kind of been around, appreciated it, but there were also people that were like seriously actually like using the practice in their life, and they were chanting and going for their goals and stuff. And I remember like I heard one particular experience where there was like this guy who was like really like chasing after like big acting things, and he was like in the final like 3 to like be playing like this just huge role, and that when I kind of heard that experience, I like looked at my like own life and I was like, wait a second, like there's people that are like me, the same age, that are like chanting for like things that they like really want. And then in that, I think that kind of really made me realize that I was like, oh, it's like, this isn't like a practice for me when I'm 25, when I'm 35, when I'm 65. Like this is a practice for me like right here, right now. So I think that was kind of like the start of it.
I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's hard to have like especially when you're younger or when you're first starting out, having like a really consistent daily practice. For people listening that like don't know anything about this Buddhism, we chant twice a day. We chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and so that's like our our daily practice. So after like hearing that person's experience, for example, like did you start to in your own life have more kind of like big dreams and ambitions? Like I know you're in graduate school now, like is that where that dream started, or like at what point in your life did that kind of bud for you?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So it's like there's like so much that like I think being in the community since young like impacted on me. So like there was so many like honestly just like benefits and things that I didn't really start to appreciate until much later, like being around in an environment where like is always hopeful and people are saying like anything can always be transformed, to be a positive, and that like even the obstacles that we're facing can really be like fuel for our growth and stuff. Like those sorts of things like just led, even without me really necessarily practicing, kind of chanting, like it gave me a certain view on life, so like I think that like helped me, like everyone has their like little ups and downs, throughout school and all these things. And I feel like my mentality towards it was a lot different than like a lot of my peers. So there's like a lot of sort of intrinsic, kind of inconspicuous sort of things that happened. But specifically in terms of like being like, this is like a moment where I like really want to use this practice. I think the first time that I really significantly remember was like with a girlfriend, actually. It was like senior year of high school.
Me too.
It was like senior year of high school, and I remember like, this has like been a recurring theme in my life. Like I didn't realize that I was like this, but like I kind of put a lot of my happiness outside of myself, and it was like, like if you ask me, is it good? Like my answer, like what was going through my head was just like, is the relationship good? Like, are we arguing? Are we doing this? Whatever. So I didn't really realize that at the time, but that was like what was going on. And, she was dealing with like, various mental health things, and so I really like said, I was like, man, like I'm gonna chant like an hour in the morning, for her to be happy, and for things to go well, and so I'm looking at it now, I'm like, I don't know how I did this, but like, and it's like so funny because I remember like the first day we did it, like I did it, like we had like our first like big argument, and I remember like telling my friends about it, like in the community, like my Buddhist friends, like, man, I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, like I decided like I'm gonna start chanting for her to be happy, and then like the first day I did it, like we had this huge argument, right? And they were like, like they kind of were like congratulating me. It's like, something is like changing. And at the time I was like, I don't really get it, but things went through, and like the relationship started kind of, souring more and more, and then we split apart, and I was like so sad and so depressed about it. But like when I'm like looking back at it now, like it's so clear that like that relationship was really unhealthy for the both of us. And it's like I actually do feel like when my prayer was like, I want this person to be happy. I feel like us having an argument, like leading to us breaking up, like actually was
For
what
your
was going to help her
happiness.
be happy, because it was not a good situation for either of us. So I feel like that
Yeah.
was like maybe one of the big moments, because I remember in that process too, there was a moment where I felt hopeless. I was like, there's nothing I can do. And remember in that moment, I was like, wait, I can always chant. Like, I remember hearing that all the time. It was like, no matter what happens, like you can always chant.
Yeah.
And that's something that you can do. And like, that was the first moment that I really felt like I was like, wait a second, So I feel like that was a huge
Yeah.
moment for me.
There's like this sense of like maybe like autonomy over your happiness in life. Like, wait a second, I don't have to be like this passive participant in everything going on in my life. I can like take action for the things that I want. I think like when you have that kind of moment for the first time, like, oh, okay, that kind of like starts to put everything in motion. And I know then in college to another relationship also led to a different kind of like trajectory for your life.
Yeah.
So maybe we can start with that story.
Yeah, man, this is so funny. So, like in university, I was studying math, so I discovered that that's like kind of what I wanted to do. Very fortunate. Like I just kind of like just said, I'm going to go do this. And then I just like took more and more classes and found that like I was good at it and like continued to like enjoy it. So that was like really nice. But how that ties into this relationship. This was like during COVID.
Wait, you were in college in 2020? Oh.
Yeah. That was my that
Wait,
started
how
off
old
at, like,
are
in
you,
my
Alex?
sophomore-
Oh my God.
I'm 26. Oh yeah, I forgot to say that in the start. Yeah, I'm 26.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Different generation.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so that was like during my sophomore year. Before I talk about the relationship, I think maybe it's good, so like when COVID started up, I remember like all of our meetings and gatherings and stuff went online. And I was like really kind of just burnt out and just tired of all this, like, because I was already doing it for school and things. I was like really suffering, in that time. And then, but we were doing meetings online, and my mom, just asked me if I wanted to, come out to one. And I was like, I don't know why, I just said like I would. And then there was this like experience that was shared by this guy who was actually a professor at the university I was going to. And he was really sharing about how at the start of like the pandemic, he felt really burnt out, like same as me, but then he really like decided to like, use his practice to like really like reinvigorate himself. And so he like, said like, I'm going to just be really productive. And I think he published like 11 papers that year or something, which like to me, as being an academic, I was like, what the, like that is like, really crazy. And so like I decided that I kind of wanted to, really rekindle my practice, off of that. And then it was like really soon right after that too is when like I, kind of like met this girl, and like this relationship was actually like really, really great, I think. I really felt like it was very mutually supportive. I just felt like really cared for, and she also did math, and so that was like another thing that we were able to like bond over. That's like kind of like through how we met. But she also was really dealing with a lot of like just mental health challenges, and like I remember it was in like June of that year, like so this is now 2021. We broke up, and it was just really sad because like both of us kind of still wanted to be in a relationship. It's just I remember she just said that like with how things are for her, it's like she doesn't really feel like she has enough energy to like put into her life, let alone like a relationship, and I remember feeling so like torn up about it, like I felt so like, why me, I was like, this is so messed up, like I didn't do anything wrong. Like like I was like, if you just told me that you hated me, it would have been easier to swallow. But it was like it just felt like there was like both of us want to make it happen, and there's just like all these external like circumstances that kind of make it not work out, and so that I think was probably like maybe one of like the lowest points, like that was that summer, like after my junior year. So that was it was like probably like 3 months or something that I was like really depressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think like breakups and many things can kind of like cause us to like plummet into that like just feeling of despair and hopelessness. What did you like do? What did those 3 months look like? You're just like day to day.
Yeah, it's So like the first month was like just like sit on the bed and like cry, you know. And then, but you know, it's like really, you know, yeah, like after 1 month though, you know, I think I was like so sick and tired, you know, of it. Like I really felt like, you know, I hit a point where like I started to like really feel like the light at the end of the tunnel that I always, you know, kind of had. Like it felt like it was like on its like little like last breath, you know. Like I remember thinking, I was just like, man, like anything would be better than, you know, continuing to feel this way. And you know, I was like on my bed and like looking over on my dresser, and like on it there's like there's like two objects on it, right? One of them was like this like absolutely ginormous bottle, like Costco bottle of vodka. And then right next to it was a math textbook, right? So like I got up and like walked over, and then this is probably maybe one of the most important decisions I've ever made in my life is I decided to pick up the math textbook, you know? So I actually brought it. I knew that like,
Oh, it's other side.
Yeah, if I was going to talk about like my life, like this book is going to like get mentioned, you know? So it's like a Commutative Ring Theory by Matsumura, you know? So I picked this book up and like I just started like reading it, you know? So like this was pretty much like all day, like from dusk till dawn, just because like when I was like reading this, like I felt like I didn't I was like so focused in it that I didn't have the time to start like thinking about a bunch of stuff like what ifs and like, you know, really feeling bad about it. So I was just like spend like pretty much all my waking moments just like, you know, reading this and like going through doing all the exercises. And you know, I was like doing it in my bed. Like I remember like I was just like I pretty much didn't really leave my bed all that much, like you know, during these like whole 3 months. But in those like latter two, I was, instead of like sitting there crying, I was like lying down like reading. This, you know, book. So I think, you know, that really kind of got me through it, you know. And yeah, that ended up actually being like one of the most important things that's I think really happened in my life, you know, because like through doing that, when I came back, like I was like a beast just in math. Like I was like I was going like crazy, you know. But you know, like honestly, like, you know, I was talking to my professors afterwards and they were like, you know, you were like always like a good student, but like after this summer, like something changed. Like everybody could see it, you know. And I remember they would ask me like, what did you do? And I was like, oh, like, you know, I read this book in its entirety and then did all the exercises, and all of them were like, what? Like nobody does this. Like I don't know anybody that's like read this whole book. Like, you know, when you need a little result, you kind of open it up and you look just in that little section, you know. But like I don't know anybody that just like goes through and reads it, you know. And I was like, what? Okay, like, well, I don't know. It's what I did, you know. And then I was in this like course that it was being taught by this one guy, and it was like mainly like third and like fourth year graduate students. But I was like,
oh, wow,
doing the best sort of, you know, in the course. And it was really thanks to everything, you know, that I like learned over that summer. And so I ended up asking him for like a letter of rec too, and that was like really, really big, I think.
Yeah. Like, what did your practice look like throughout this, like from before the breakup until this, like asking for the letter of rec?
Yeah, so, you know, right around the time that I decided to like rekindle my practice, I decided to actually apply to Columbia, you know. So this was as a junior, right?
Okay.
COVID stuff made things really weird, and it kind of made sense. And like I knew that I wanted to go there, and specifically I wanted to work with this guy Johan, you know, who's there, and so I knew this from like my sophomore year, you know. And so in my junior year, I decided to apply, and I ended up like not getting in, you know. So this was like March of 2021, right? I was already dating this girl, you know, but I get rejected, you know. And then I remember I was like, oh man, like this is tough, but like this was like my dream, you know. Like this was my dream. And I remember my mom asking me, it was like, have you ever had like something like really big that you felt was so impossible and you chanted for and you got it? And I remember I like thought about it and I was like, no. You know, like I chanted for various, you know, things in the past, and things always went well, you know, and I had like various different, you know, benefits, but like I never really had the courage actually really to challenge something that was long term, that was like really big. And I remember she just was like, let's challenge this together, you know, and like let's just chant, you know, together for a year, this so that you can apply again, you know, next year and then get in. And you know, so I was doing that, right? So this was like in March, and then, you know, I remember at one point too, they like released the like list of the people that got in, and like, you know, that was really scary because it was like 8 people, You know,
Oh.
yeah, it's like 8 people for the entire program, right? You know, and I think they probably like get like 800, 900 applicants. So they're talking like 1%,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And then they also talk about like what universities that they go to. And like when I was like reading this, I just felt like my like heart drop because it was Harvard, MIT, Caltech, and then like there was these 3 other universities that I hadn't heard of. So after I like did my like 3 Google searches, I was like, okay, they're the best universities in like in Russia, China, and Australia. I was like, dude, like I'm not gonna get it, you know. So like I was still, you know, of course, you know, together with my mom, I was like chanting, but you know, there was like a little bit of a period where I was like, I don't think I could do this, you know. But eventually that really started to change. In the meanwhile, you know, like right in the middle of this, right, is when that breakup happened, you know. And so like that like really normally would have been like with the girlfriend like in like senior year, like you know, when we broke up, like I just didn't really do anything, you know. Like it really just threw my life, you know, out of whack, you know. So like I feel like that moment could have really been a thing that like totally stopped all the momentum I had, you know, going towards this. But like, you know, we talk about there's like the concept like turning poison into medicine, where we're like take something that's like negative, something that's bad, and like through our Buddhist practice really turn it into something like medicine that really helps us. So I feel like that is what happened so viscerally during that summer when like I decided to pick up this book, you know, like it you know, like as a result of that, when I was taking this class, you know, in the fall of my like senior year, and like asking for this letter of recommendation, he asked me like what school I wanted to go to. When I told him it was Columbia, he said like, I think that's like a really great fit for you. And then he even, I remember just like of his own volition just said, I'll tell Johan about you. And I was like, what? Like I was like, that's the guy that like I want to work with. I was like, okay, you know. And then afterwards I even found out too that like he used to be like Johan's student.
Wow.
So like I'm like
Close
getting
connection.
his, you know, like that's like crazy, right? And like I just, you know, when I eventually started like when I did this like interview, I remember asking like what made my like application stand out, you know, and they said it was your letters of recommendation, you know, and like that came directly because of like what happened in that, you know, summer. So like I really do feel like that breakup was like one of the best things that happened to me, despite the fact that like it sucked. It like totally sucked. But you know, again, I really was able to turn that into medicine, you know. So, you know, anyway, then like as a result, I mean, I got in, like, you know, I'm now here in New York, you know, and like the craziest thing too is like, you know, in my year 7 people got in, so it was like even more competitive than the year before, right? So
I mean, the thing I love about that story is like it is such a like clear example of that concept, because like in our life there's always things that are like, wow, this is the most painful thing that has ever happened to me, has ever happened to anyone ever, and sometimes it is that painful, sometimes in my case I'm, you know, dramatizing, but we really can, like, if we have the courage, like your mom was saying, like it really takes courage to be able to decide like, okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to pick myself up, even though that's like the much harder decision. The path of least resistance is laying in the bed and crying for the entire summer.
Totally.
But so I just really feel like it's such a like great example, even though, it's like this painful thing and it's so hard. But then like when you can turn it, you look back and like, for myself, I just like look back with a lot of appreciation for myself. Like, wow, I'm so proud of myself for not giving up in that moment, because man, I really wanted to. Or maybe I gave up for a little while, but then, you know, like was able to pick myself back up.
You know, like I feel like I can have like I'm not lying when I say that I have appreciation for that experience. Which is, I think, a really amazing thing to be able to say, because it's like what I've just learned is that, like, you know, the things that come up in our lives, like we have such a strong desire to naturally want to say if it's good or bad, like the event itself, right? It's like, say I broke up with my girlfriend and I was really sad. It's like everyone will be like, oh, that's a bad thing that happened in your life. But like I really feel like what I've learned is that it's just a thing. Whether or not it's good or bad is actually like up to me, you know? And like I find that like through these experiences, like letting go of the idea that this should be a bad thing, so I should be sad about it. Like I just choose to like look at it as like something that's kind of good, you know, because it's like you either get to be happy or not. Like why would you pick the the bad one, right? So I feel like I can like actually look back with like genuine appreciation, like not lying about it. Like, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have been here, So it was really important that happened to me, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it takes time. It's not like, something painful happens and then I sit down and I chant and like suddenly, oh wow, now this is like I feel so much appreciation. Like it's a process, right? I think like at least at the beginning for me a lot of it is like, okay, I'm just chanting with like all of the pain that I'm feeling, and maybe there's like this little glimmer of like hope though, like okay, but it's not gonna always feel this way. And then like each day, which going back to chanting every day, that's why this is important, is like, you build, right? So then you look back 1 week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, like, oh, actually I do feel hope now, or I feel like I can actually like have the energy to take action. So anyway, I mean, you're in New York now. So what was the transition like? Was it like, walking on clouds? This is everything I ever dreamed. I made it here. What happened?
I mean, there's aspects of that, like when I was, here, like I never thought I would like live in New York. Like
me either.
Like, yeah, like
how do we end up here?
Like I thought when I was a kid, I was like, this is the place for like people that like have these huge dreams, like that want to be movie stars and actors and singers and things like that.
That's not me.
I was like, that's not me. Like I'm just like living my life, right? And then like I knew like I wanted to go to Columbia for like 2.5 years or something, and like I knew that it was in New York, but like it wasn't until I got in that I was like, wait, like if I get in, like I'm gonna live in New York. And I was like, what the heck? Like I never thought I would live in New York. This is for people who have huge dreams. And then I was like, wait, I have huge dreams, So like, so there was definitely an aspect where I was like totally on cloud nine. Like I would like go see like crazy stuff on the subway. I would like see rats, and I was just like, yes, I'm in New York. I made it,
I made it, baby.
Exactly. But also, like, as soon as I got here, I started, like, suffering a ton, too. Like, it was so hard. Like, I commuted from my house going to university. So this was, like, kind of my first time, like, living on my own. And, like, I'm, like, paying rent. I'm, like, trying to figure out how to, like, get food. I'm, like, adjusting to this new environment. Like, I'm going into my Ph.D. And, like, it brought up so many insecurities out of my life. And, I've had this, like, kind of depressive tendency of, like, kind of ups and downs, like, a lot of times where it's good, but then like there's like a week where I'm just like really don't like, it just feels like it's so hard to get out of bed or to like even just like take care of myself. That really started in like high school, but like that really came to the forefront. I feel like, when I was in like New York, I was really taking my practice a lot more seriously, probably because, I just had this amazing benefit. Like I don't feel like without this practice that I would have ended up here. So I was like, okay, right, like let me like really take this like kind of more seriously. Let me try to chant more, and I feel like as a result, like a lot of those things that I really need to work out kind of came up to the surface. So it was, again, it was like kind of tough, and I was like going through it. But I think that we learned that, being like, kind of like white knuckling it, is like, actually that is great, it's a little tough at the time, but
but there went like your life kind of like bullet train forward.
Totally, I was like, I always think about it where I'm like, like if our life is like a sword or something, and we're like, really being like polished and like sharpened or something, I was like, man, like I don't imagine that the sword really enjoys that, But like the end of it, it's like probably really glad that it's like, wow, I'm so sharp now,
Yeah. Oh, I've never.
Yeah.
I You're right. That's a great.
I think about that. I'm like, I don't think like I was like, does the sword like being sharpened? Probably not.
Probably not. But at the end,
it's important. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So how did you like navigate that period of kind of like the depressive like time? What did your like day-to-day life look like? How did you get to this point?
Wow. I mean, it's like periods, like there is, I feel like I'm developing so rapidly, that like, if you ask like 6 months ago, 3 months ago, it's like, it would like look different, like in different, phases. But like, when I first got here too, like talking about chanting consistently, I still like even like when I came here, I was like, 23, really quickly, soon after turn 24, I would be like chanting a good bit for like 1 week or something. But then I remember like there was times going by where like there was like probably like a couple months where it was like pretty much the only time I was chanting is like with other people, and that was like maybe once or twice a week. So I was like just kind of like
scraping by.
Literally, yeah, it just like felt like, really scraping by, but I think that, the community that I was around like really encouraged me, and I got support, but they also really encouraged me to like break through, like push, like that. Like, when I was back in Seattle, like I feel like, my practice was like really learned from like my mom, and so that was like, really great. But like maybe because it's like a mom, like I feel like it maybe got coddled like, a little bit or something. So like now that I was like out on my own and like in New York where like everything is so fast paced, like that was like people were like maybe a little bit more willing to like, really push me and be like, hey, like don't give up, like let's go for it, and like there was times where I was like, like it felt like a car without any wheels or something, just like just like scraping on the ground, like sparks flying out. But, I got through it because they were like really there for me, you know, like when things got tough. And, through that, I kind of just built up like a lot more resilience, I think.
Was there any like moment in the, like, since you've been here that you felt like you really were able to like, I don't know, like shift?
I would go through these periods of depression, like it was like maybe like several weeks, like a month or something, that things would be like, kind of good, and like I was kind of just, going through, and I was able to like kind of function. And then I would have like periods of like a week where I was like really not that functional, I wasn't, really getting out of bed that much. But like last year, like maybe around February, like it was like every other day, like one day I would like wake up and I would like chant, thought, and I would like be really productive, and like I was really like just happy going for it. And then the next day I would wake up and like I just felt like I couldn't get out of bed. And then like the next day I would wake up and I would be like scrambling to like make up for the day before. And I would, chant, and like, for maybe like honestly like 5-6 weeks, like I think like quite literally like every day it was just oscillating back and forth. And this was like so painful because like, so many things came out of my life too, where I was like, I felt so hopeless, I remember I felt like I was like totally convinced that like I'm broken, I was like something must have happened during COVID where like some neuron in my brain got severed permanently, because it's like on the days where I was like good, and I was like, I remember like I was like chanting and like I felt so much better, and I was like doing everything, and I was like, wow, like I'm so capable, I can do so much. And then the next day would come by and then I would like feel like I can't do anything. I'm like, I just want to chant, I want to do this, I wanted like, and it's like, it's not like I was physically exhausted, like I could have done everything, but like there was something in my head that just like didn't let me or something, and it felt like I know what the ailment is, I know what the cure is, I have it in my hand, but I'm like not drinking it, know. So I was like, any rational person would like in that situation would just like drink the cure,
medicine.
But like I wasn't doing that. So I really honestly felt like during that period I felt like I was like broken fundamentally as a human. It was that was a really, really dark time, but it's like crazy because like I guess I just hit a point where I was like, I am like tired of this, I think that's where a lot of us hit, we're like, I don't want to be like this actually, and I remember hearing a lot of like, friends really talking about like how chanting like based on the vow was like really powerful, and like I didn't know what that meant, like really. So I remember I like just was like, well, like I got nothing left, like like might as well just try this. So I remember like just chanting like I want to make a vow, and like I want to like deepen it, and I want to like act on it or something. Like I didn't even know like what that meant, but like somehow that really felt like I felt like a lot of energy, coming like forward like through my life, and like now that like I have the benefit of like hindsight, I kind of like see that it's like, our vow is just like basically like I want to help people be happy, like we believe that like in the way distant past, in some past life, we said like I'm gonna like be born with whatever deck of cards that I got handed, and then show other people that like no matter what the situation is, we can transform it to like be a boon for us, and can really be happy. So by being happy, like now it's like I really use that experience to really encourage other people, because I know there's like a lot of people when I'm talking to, I'm like honestly surprised to see that so many people actually have similar sorts of stuff. So it's like for me being able to have like kind of gotten out of that, and really I think is living that vow, so to speak. Like I'm really able to transform that negative experience into something that I can use to really encourage other people.
Yeah. With like a couple of other guests recently, I've been like, it keeps coming up that like when you're feeling stuck in some way, whether it's like mental health or like some sort of limiting belief about your life, when you can think about it like and chant about it in terms of like a purpose that's just beyond yourself, your own self, your ego, whatever, but how can I somehow contribute to society? How can I support other people becoming happy? That like gives this sense of just like purpose to your life, like, because it feels good when you can help other people. Like it feels like, wow, okay, like I really can overcome this and I'm gonna help like encourage others. And I found for myself to actually, when I also like went through a very deep depression in 2020, 2021, similarly, like didn't we all?
Yeah. It's almost like something happened during that time that might have.
Yeah, I think like the thing that helped me not just like, wow, cure my depression, but like gave me something like to motivate me to like, because at the time, like I just felt like there was no, what's the purpose of anything? But as I like started to think about like, okay, but I can like through my own life be able to support other people and encourage them that like it is possible to be able to overcome or like navigate living with depression. That was like, okay, now I actually have something that I'm like moving toward. Because I think before, like I couldn't even set goals for myself.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have career goals. I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want anything.
Yeah.
But that switch was like, oh, actually I do have something I'm like moving toward now.
Right.
For you, was it like oh, right away now I feel like a sense of purpose? Or
so I feel like every time I've been down, it's like in those moments things really deepen, like I think all of my experiences have kind of been like that, like even with like breakup in senior year, I guess a breakup, in college, like all these, really low points where it's like you find something deeper inside of you, and then you kind of really, that like kind of really pulls you out. For most of them, it's like been pretty gradual, you know, but like I don't know what it was about this one in particular. Like it really was like instant. It really gave me confidence. It's like, like it isn't always going to just be instant. I remember at one point you were talking about something where it was like, it's not like you have these bad things that are happening and you say you chant 20 minutes and then suddenly you're like, oh great, I'm so glad this happened. Like that doesn't really happen very often.
It does happen sometimes.
But it does
You're
happen
right. It does happen
sometimes,
yeah.
right? And we talk about the power of prayer and like how anything really can transform like moment to moment, and it's like I think this experience really made me believe that like that potential exists, like it might not, it's not like it's always gonna be that way, but it's like it made me like really reconfirm that I was like, okay, people were not lying, when they said that, because it really was like I just like woke up and I just was like, I'm just like done, I'm just gonna chant with this, and like the next day I woke up and I was like, I'm gonna go chant with this, and like every day it felt like this growing momentum, like I remember like before, like I would always sort of like chant just because like I felt like I needed to, or like maybe I was like I'm supposed to, or I'm like I need this in my life, otherwise I'm gonna da-da-da, know, but like I started really feeling like I was like, I woke up and I was like, woo, I can't wait to chant, I loved doing it. I was like so happy, like when I was going to sleep, like I struggle with like staying up like way too late, but like during that time I was like, man, like I'm so excited to go to sleep so I can wake up and then chant in the morning, like I really it was like so crazy. I've like never really experienced that, really, so I was like, wow, this like there is something to this, and like I was really like fighting on all fronts, like it felt like I was just everything that I was doing I felt enthusiasm for, and I felt like this sense of purpose, and I was just like really like just going, like giving my 100% everything that I was doing. And it really was just like a overnight kind of thing, so. But that's like
really
maybe the only time. It might be like the only time that's, like happened, quite that fast. Yeah.
But you were still like making this progress forward, right? So that, that like one moment kind of everything pivoted, but you were like building up to.
Eventually, like, I don't know, it wore off, and then
Yeah.
again, there were periods too where I wasn't, chanting as much, but like, I think those moments built it up such that like I valued it a little bit more, and it's like
Mm.
the amount of time that I was chanting, or like how serious I was about it, how consistent was
Mm.
increasing, like in a little micro scale. I could never really see how like I was chanting more consistently, and like many times I was just like, I don't know why I'm doing this, like I know that I should chant but I just can't, and I
Mm.
remember people just kept telling me like, it's progress, you need
Mm.
to have patience, and I just like, I didn't feel like I could believe that, I was
Yeah.
like, this is gonna be me forever, like again, that was like some part of my negativity that was like
Yeah.
determined, like that, just like there's this aspect of my life that's never gonna change.
Yeah.
But like I look back when I first came here, and like I'm looking at my life now, and like even I'm not like cured of depression, like I still
Mm-hmm.
deal with it. Now my outlook on it is like way different after all these experiences,
Yeah.
but like even through those highs and the lows and stuff, like I'm like way more consistent. So I'm like, for me, I
Mm.
really do, I was like, wow, you're right, like, granted I've been here 2.5 years, like it took a while, but like
Mm.
that progress was there, and like the whole
Yeah.
time I was doubting it. 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 And like, but now
Yeah.
I look back and I was like, wow, like I don't know like when that happened, but like it
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, because this practice is like day to day, moment to moment. And sometimes, like, for that day, you feel like, wow, I really did not like move. I probably regressed actually. But then when you like look back to the last year, 2 years, whatever, you
Yeah.
see that like the accumulation of all of those like small efforts forward then kind of blossom.
Yeah. I know.
And I like that you say that you're not just like cured of depression. Like,
Nah.
I still experience anxiety. I go to therapy. I take medication. But I think the thing for me, like in using my practice, like to take better care of my mental health, is I think similarly, like I just look at my anxiety so differently now. Like when I first started really experiencing it in college, I felt so trapped by it and like, oh my
Mm.
God, this is my life for the rest of my life. And now, like, anxiety comes up and I'm like, "Ah, hello, old friend." Like, you're telling me something about myself, and I'm gonna chant about like with that worry and anxiety until I can kind of see it differently. So yes, I think that's
Yeah.
important. But now, like, thinking to this idea of like a vow or having like this purpose beyond just your own immediate self,
Mm.
um, how does that or does that relate to the work that you're doing? And do you feel
Mm.
there's like a connection with Buddhism and math? Totally separate.
So like, I think like for me, like it's like multiple layers,
Yeah.
to it, like this vow that we talk about, right? Like, in our Buddhist terms, right, is like really this vow of like a bodhisattva of the earth, which is
Mm.
just like, it's just these people that, way back in the past
Mm.
emerged, and they said like, I'm going to be born in the future, where there's suffering all around, born with my suffering, but then I'm going to transform it. And then
Mm.
through that, I'm going to encourage other people and show them how they can do it, and like, spoiler alert, oh, all of us are the bodhisattvas of the earth. That's like our like, our belief, right? It's just we
Yeah.
aren't like awakened to that. We haven't kind of like
Mm.
remembered that. For me to like really chant about this vow, I feel like was like me really like asserting like fundamentally what is my identity as a person is like
Mm.
a bodhisattva of the earth, right? And
Mm.
so what that just means is like, I am a mathematician, I'm doing these things. Of course, there's like all the ways that my life is like about, but like through all of that, like the purpose of this is to advance that mission to like really help people be happy. And
Mm.
so I felt like when I was able to center on that identity,
Mm.
I think probably part of the reason that I didn't feel as like why I started feeling so much better is like that identity exists regardless of like if your life is
Yeah.
going good or bad. In that time too, there was this like, I kind of like right after that too, I like,
Mm.
asked a girl kind of, out, and
Another
I know,
relationship.
I know, it just keeps coming back to this, but and I was like turned down, right? But
Mhm.
like, and this was something, I really chanted like a long time, about this because because I knew I have a tendency to look for stuff outside of myself, and I really didn't want it to be based off of that. So I guess like in some sense you could say I was like invested in it, you know. But like when it was like a no, I really didn't feel like that like hung up about it, right? Because whereas before I would have been like, oh no, like the girl that I like doesn't like me, I must be bad, and you know, like my happiness was based off of, is the relationship going well? But oh, I just got turned down, like it's going horrible, my life sucks, you know. But like I think when I was like really chanting and like awakened to that identity, me being with this person or not doesn't change that. Like I can still accomplish my mission. In fact, like because I was doing all these things, you know, I was making a lot of good causes. I feel like this no just indicates that it's like, oh, maybe that's just we're not meant supposed to be in that sense. Like, you know, us being in a relationship isn't what's going to advance that. I can't like, you know, do my mission, you know, so to speak, you know, in that relationship. And so that really, I think, helped me like not look for happiness outside of myself. And then I started like, the amazing thing was like, you know, this was in the avenue of maybe relationships, which as we've discovered here is like usually where I get hit really hard. But like I also felt so insecure about my math stuff, you know, like when I first came here and things, and I was like, oh, my classes maybe aren't going well, or these people are better than me, and I'm feeling bad because my identity was like, I'm a mathematician, so if I'm not as good at it, then I should be sad, right? But again, like when I center down on like, you know, I'm a bodhisattva of the earth, I have a vow to help people be happy, I'm gonna go do stuff based off of that. If my math wasn't going well, like I'd be like, okay, let me try harder in that. But there was no reason for me to be like, I suck, I have no value. The reason I'm talking about that is, you know, in terms of my work, what I do, you know, like the stuff that I do is really theoretical. I don't really feel like it has that much relevance to people's, you know, like kind of actual lives,
daily
you know,
lives,
like I'm a pure mathematician, you know. There are other people in that sector who do, you know, different stuff that's maybe more readily, you know, applicable. But like I'm not really like, you know, I'm not going to discover the secret to the universe. I think I'm not going to like, you know,
don't sell yourself
maybe, you know,
no
but
limiting
sure, but you know, like, so it's just like in my work, something that I used to really struggle with too, I was like, man, like I don't think, like this feels so selfish, like I'm just doing this because I think it's cool, like I don't feel like I'm contributing, you know, to the world. But like I really have been able to kind of move away from that and then realize that I was like, that's not necessarily true. Like I am a person and there are people around me and I can still fight for their happiness where I am, you know. So for example, like I'm a TA, you know, I also teach classes, you know, and like in that I feel like that's a great opportunity because like, you know, I'm teaching a lot of usually like freshmen in college, and they're like, you know, they've only gotten a bunch of A's and stuff, and then suddenly they're starting to struggle, you know. And like I know that from experience and stuff too, like everyone is like freaking out. They're like, oh my god, I did bad on one test, like my life is gonna just end, I'm never gonna be able to be anything, you know. And I feel like I can really share with them like really openly, honestly. It's like, hey, I know it feels this way, but it's not true. Like, you know, I had these things that I struggled with, and you know, I know a lot of students too struggle with like mental health. Like, you know, I skipped a bunch of classes because in college because of that stuff, you know, but I was still able to end up where I am, you know. So like for me, like my depression and things, I feel like this is now an opportunity for me to show people that like, yeah, you might be depressed, but it's like, you know, whereas before I was like, I just want to remove that from me. Now I'm like, no, like let me show that even if you're depressed, you don't have to give up on your dreams, you know. So I was really open with people about it, and I also told them like, hey, you know, I understand. So it's like if things are going on, let me know, and maybe we can try to work on it, and you know, maybe we can adjust things slightly, you know, based off of that. And you know, I think that it really like showed, like all of my teaching reviews, like, you know, even if people have said my teaching style vibed with them or it didn't, like almost everyone says like I really felt like Alex cared about us, and he was very, you know, flexible, you know. So that I feel like in my work, my Buddhist practice shows up there, you know, even if it isn't necessarily showing up in my work, right? And the other reason I brought this too, despite the fact knowing that we were going to talk about it, right? The thing that I really realized and that I'm personally trying to challenge right now is like, you know, the guy writing this probably didn't feel that, you know, his work in writing this textbook was ever gonna, you know, change somebody's life. But, you know, for me, it really did. Like, man, I was like really, if that kept going, I don't know if I like would have started being like really, you know, suicidal. But like somehow this really save me, So I really feel like I can't sell myself short. Like, who knows? Maybe my work will, like directly in that sense help somebody. But even if it doesn't, I feel fine, because I get to be in certain positions that a lot of people aren't compassionate towards, their students and things, like, again, because I like my Buddhist practice is like, like you take action to like help people. I was like, I'm gonna like be the bridge, and I'm gonna like really help them. I feel like it can show up in that aspect too, so I don't really, whereas before I was struggling about how is Buddhism relating to my life, and am I really being Buddhist, and how I'm like doing my work, things like that. I really have been able to, I think, transform that so that like no matter what work I was really doing, I feel like I would be able to have the confidence that like I can still like apply my Buddhist philosophy and be a good, I don't know, good Buddhist, like, actually like applying it, basically just in my work. So
Yeah. I love hearing that, because we don't all have to like work for nonprofits or so. I mean, it's wonderful if you do, but it's not like prescriptive, right? That like, okay, if you practice Buddhism, you have to have this kind of career, this kind of family. Like, we can really live any kind of life that we want, have any dreams. We can chant to be financially secure. We can chant for a relationship. We can chant for anything. Yeah, so I think to kind of close things out, first of all, this was really great.
Thanks.
Thank you. I always like to end with just like a piece of advice. So I think the question I will ask today is for somebody listening that, has never tried chanting, but is like curious about Buddhism, but they don't really know like how to like take the first step. What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, there's like maybe two, so I know that Buddhability, like you've connected a lot of people to like a local community. One thing I would say is like the local community is like just so key, like we learn everything through people, I think, and that's the best way to learn it. That's also what I'm learning in my studies. Like the best way to learn stuff is not necessarily just sitting in a textbook alone. It's to really talk with people who have those experiences, and they can break it down in a way that's like understandable because they went through it and they're like another person, and you can connect on that basis. So like definitely I would say if you're curious about it, you should get connected, talk to people. My experience has been we've all been like super nice. It's really great, so that's definitely one thing. But then on the aspect of chanting, because it's been something that's like really hard to do consistently, but like I really have felt like the benefits are so much more, like it increases exponentially when it is consistent. What I've really been doing is really feeling like no matter how much it is, just be happy to just do that much, right? Because like I used to feel like I was like, if I don't have X amount of time to do it, what's the point or something, and like I remember one time like I like woke up, I was like running so late, and then like I had like 1 minute to chant, and like I'm chanting like definitely like more than 10 times that, 20 times that, usually is what I was going for. And where like before I would like just be like, what's the point, doing this? Like I was just like, let me just take even this like, 1 minute, and so I think for me being able to just like, no matter how much it is, just try it, and from there I think the consistency builds up.
Yeah.